Well, Eldridge, thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Um, yes, I can. So, my name is Eldridge DeMello. I am from Angola. I've been working in the space sector for 7 years now. I've done a little bit of everything, in terms of satellite operations. I've worked in the Mission Control Center. I've done business development. I'm a project manager, by the way, in the space sector. And because of that, I was fortunate enough to work in different companies. So starting in the Angolan space program, a national space program, and then moving into private companies in the space sector. So kind of helped me to get a big overview of how the space sector works in terms of the private side and more of the state side.
And were you a project manager before getting to the space sector as well?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. The thing is that I have a bachelor degree in information systems. So before joining the space sector, I was more into coding and creating databases for organizations. And right before I joined the space program, I was working at a bank. Funny enough. So I was working at the bank, and then I remember like applying one day. Like there was this ad about the space program in my country. They're like, like this cool cartoon that you have in America, we want you. So we had something similar. I was like, okay, let me apply for this. And I applied and I got in. But I didn't become a project manager until about 4 years ago.
And you said you started out as a coder, database designer, that type of thing. What language, like what technologies did you use?
Oh, there was a very long time ago. So like for the databases, I was basically just working with PHP. I've done a little bit of web design, so I was like playing around with HTML and CSS, a little bit of Java, but not. I wasn't an expert, because my time as working as a information system specialist was very short. I would say about a year right after I left university. So I worked at that type of job for about a year, and then I joined the space program where I had to like forget everything about that because then I had to learn about satellite telecommunication, and it was a different world for me.
And what's been the biggest learning, the biggest thing that surprised you about moving into the space sector?
So the first thing I have to be honest, and I hope people that operate satellites are not going to be pissed at me, is just how boring it is to operate satellites. So that's kind of my opinion because growing up, especially up in a developing country, for us, someone who operates satellite is just like, wow, this person is like, so smart, and I can never be this person in my life. And we would see in movies, how movies they exaggerate a little bit, So this was like a big thing. Started operating satellites. It was very hard in the beginning. I had to learn all the procedures. And by the way, when you're working in a mission control center, you have procedures to follow anyway. So you're hardly ever thinking out of the box or really being the smart guy in the room because you have like guidelines on how to proceed. You have an anomaly, you need to follow certain procedures, and in case you follow the procedures and they're not working, then you need to call the expert, someone who built the satellite, and these people they usually get in and they try to fix the problem. So for me, this was the big wow, and then just like what I said, how boring it was for me, especially working on night shifts. But it was a very, very beautiful and important time of my life, and I had a lot of fun.
And are these mainly geosynchronous satellites or?
Yes, and it's important. It's good that you asked this question. Otherwise, satellite operators would really kill me. So yeah, when you're operating LEO satellites, you kind of have more action because you have different passes throughout the day. But when you're operating geo satellites, they sort of are like in the same position the whole time. And for a guy like me in the Mission Control Center, I was working in the ground control segment with the radio frequency equipment. So part of my job was to make sure that the antennas were aligned. And since the satellite is always standing at the same spot, and we only had one satellite, so your antenna is always almost going to be always aligned, and you hardly have action. So the thing is, you want some action, but when you have anomalies, it's also not a good thing because then people are in trouble.
Exactly. So I got to imagine somebody working at, say, Starlink might have a completely different experience than you've had.
Oh yeah, oh definitely. I mean, we're talking about I was like looking after one baby, and these guys are looking what 5,000 spacecrafts. I mean, it, definitely you need to have a different type of management, different types of groups operating, and different shifts. Yeah, and it's way much harder. Yeah, I agree with that.
And did you have an interest in space before joining the space industry?
Not at all, because like as I said, like growing up in a developing country, this was just something unaccessible to me. So it's not something that's like kids from my time were really dreaming, because it was not a possibility. We didn't have space programs. There was no space companies in my country. So actually, I come from a country that it's rich on oil. So as a kid, we always used to dream. I want to be like an engineer working, and in oil rigs and stuff like that. So we're not really thinking about space. And I have this cool story. So I have this very funny memory about 2010. So I was in this country called Namibia, which is a neighbor country from where I came from, and I read somewhere on the news that some part of a spacecraft was going to be enter Earth. So I probably misunderstood that. So I was driving in the night, and I stopped at the red light, and there were like fireworks. And this woman, she stopped right next to me, and she asked me, "What's going on?" And I told her like, "Satellites are coming down." I didn't know. Sorry if she's watching this interview. I would like to apologize. Yeah, but then I didn't really have that dream of working in the space sector.
And do you think kids growing up today feel like it's more accessible, or do you think the same barriers still exist for kids growing up today in your country?
Not anymore, because one of the things that I admire a lot about the space program in my country, and is that so you have a lot of folks from different backgrounds, from different areas of the country, and you have also myself as well. So kids can look at me and be, hey, I came up, I grew up where he grew up. So if he's working on satellite operations, I can also do it. So definitely, the perspective has changed, and people actually now like you see now kids dressing up as astronauts in parties, and this is very like we see that there's some sort of change happening.
And I guess, like, how old were you when you got on the internet?
Oh, I was lucky. I got on the internet. I would say I was about 10 years old, but it's not the same thing for everyone where I grew up. I was just lucky because my dad needed internet, because he worked at the government. So the type of work that he was doing, he needed internet. So we had internet, and I had to stick anyways to use the internet, because back in the days when you were using the internet, so people can't really call the home line would be busy, and my mom would always be pissed, and like they would know, because people would tell her, "Oh, we tried calling you the whole day, and the line was busy." So she would know that we were using the internet. But as I was saying, I was lucky. So I started using the internet around 99 to 2000. But even in right now, there are kids who have no access to internet. I have kids that go to public schools, and sometimes to private schools as well. So there's actually a challenge. During this pandemic, the schools had to close, like in Europe, in North America, in some countries also in South America. Kids are still being able to have online classes. But in my country, it's just not really possible for everyone, because not everyone has access to the internet. And even if they did, not even every kid has like a computer at home.
And I do remember the dial-up days. I got on the internet in the early 1990s through a dial-up modem. And before that, we had bulletin board systems where people would hook up their computers to a dedicated line, and you would
Yeah.
call in, and you can leave messages for other people, but you had to hang up so that they could call in and get the messages, and do things like this. I remember one of the other big problems wasn't just people calling you getting a busy signal, but most homes here had multiple lines, multiple
Yeah.
telephones connect to the same line. So, you'd be in the middle of this download and somebody pick up the line and they're break and you have to start over again. You'd be like, oh, mom,
Yeah, yeah.
I was on the
Yeah. And the other annoying part was also the dial-up tone. So that was also people would
exactly.
all hear that.
Kids
Yeah.
today probably would hear that. I mean, I would love to go on the street and say, hey, what do you think this is? And people are
Yeah.
like, is that some type of electronic dance music? It's not too good.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no beat.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, do you see that, like, how long do you think it would take for the, as we currently stand today, for everybody in your country to have a computer and have access to internet? Is that something that you think we're on the path for? Or the way that we're currently going, it would never happen? Or, I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it will definitely happen. So the first step that, in my country, we have a Ministry of Telecommunication and Information Technology. So like one of the main tasks that this ministry has been executing is really make technology accessible to everyone. And the philosophy around our first telecommunication satellite was actually to provide telecommunication to everyone, because this is the best way for you to bring everyone closer together. And the government has been working on that. We have the first company that is already developing smartphones. So we hope to have companies also developing laptops and computers. This will definitely lower the prices because we import almost everything. So this also has some sort of impact on the pricing of stuff in the country. But the government has been working towards making technology more accessible. I think in the next 5 years, there's going to be a huge change. So the number of, let's say, kids from 10 to 15-year-olds that don't have access to smartphones or computers, it's not going to be the same thing 5 years from now.
Hmm. And, I was talking to somebody yesterday for my Countdown to the Moon project, and we were talking about how important the internet is for spreading information and learning things. And I had a flash of insight I wanted to share with you and see what your thought was. And that was, not only is it good for learning how to do things, but there's a negative side that we all are getting a common understanding of what's impossible. Like, um, you know, uh, there's a story that I love telling about how this guy was late to the math class. And, the professor had these three problems up on the board and he just wrote them down and he worked on them all weekend. And he comes back on Monday. He's like, "Oh, here's the solution to one," but I really couldn't figure out the other two. And the thing that he missed in class was that the teacher was showing that these are three unsolvable problems. But because he thought it was just a homework assignment, he went home, worked on it, and solved it. Uh,
Wow.
and so I kind of worry, sometimes not knowing that things are impossible makes them possible.
Yes, definitely. Because I mean, when you haven't been proven that this is impossible, that you cannot achieve something, so you're always pushing for it. And sort of like the internet kind of makes us a little bit lazy, because look at the people who built the rockets to take like the first people to the moon. They didn't have internet. So but now we have so much information, and how do you filter information? And it's sort of like we still haven't figured out, because now we have more information that humans ever had. You can just type in whatever you want, even if you're sick. Even if you got a headache, you can type in your symptoms. There's all sorts of information. If you want to build a rocket, it's there, but then you can't really, because so we kind of, as humans, I think we lose the type of word that I'm looking for, is sort of the ingenuity, just really being creative and figuring a way out, because this is what it's all about. Being humans, we're always figuring a way out to do things, impossible things. But as you said, when you go online and you're like, how do I build, how do I put together 10 rockets to go straight to the moon in less than 30 minutes, and they'll tell you it's impossible, you can't do that.
Wow. Yeah, and then you look at how we mass produce all sorts of things like cars. I mean, you have like the Toyota factory, and I mean, a car is coming off that line literally every minute, you know? And you're like, look at how complex cars are with all their stuff. And rockets in some respects aren't as complex as cars, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, you have this big tank hooked up to a to a rocket engine hooked up to some guidance a computer. It doesn't even have four
yeah.
doors.
Yeah, it sounds simple. Actually, it sounds very simple. So as you say, you just have a rocket, you need engine and fuel. So that's it.
So you weren't interested in space before going into the satellite sector, but now you're in the satellite sector, and I know you're involved in like Space Heroes. That's how we met.
Yeah.
So I guess can you talk about the journey of how you went from just being in this industry to actually being excited enough about it to join something like Space Heroes?
Yeah, so one of the beautiful things about the space industry, it's because it's a small industry, people tend to be very united. It's all sorts of projects that people are trying to get together for a common good, for the greater good of humanity. And this is what led me to Space Hero. So I was just like, wow, these people, they want to send someone to space, no matter the nationality, no matter the background, because one thing that really counts a lot in the space sector, or used to count before the democratization of space, was that space was just for very smart people, for engineers, people who can build satellites and build rockets. If you are an artist, there's no room for you. If you're into market, and now with like the private sector, and we need to make money, so people start realizing we need all sorts of people, and Space Hero is kind of that. Yeah, your background doesn't matter. If you are into business, into art, if you're an engineer, our goal is to send someone to space, and this was like something that really resonates with me because, well, I used to work on space education programs. And one of the things that I always used to fight to get out of people's mentality was that space is for everyone, no matter your background. There is always something that you can do in the space sector. And Space Hero kind of like represented that to me. And I was just like, I really need to be a part of this.
And I just, some other kind of efforts to get everyday people into space. And I was kind of curious if you were aware of them and if you participated or thought about them as well, like the Dear Moon project that's planning to send people around the moon. I was wondering if you heard about that as well.
Yeah, I did. I did hear about that, and actually, I did sign up. So it's also a very cool initiative. It's you have someone who's willing to pay for seats and people to join in to go around the moon. So that's very cool. And that's the thing about the space sector. It's a very small industry, and people, they sort of tend to try to work together, help each other. Although there's a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of collaboration, or even sometimes, as you might say, co-opetition.
And he's looking to identify artists, and he left the idea or definition of artist to be very broad. Yeah, originally they were talking about like painter and a movie director and uh, you know photographer and musician, actor, etc., etc. What did you put down as being your art?
So my art is really project management. I see project management as an art because, I'm a fan of arts in general. I admire paintings and good music, good movies, as you were saying, directors. I'm a fan of a lot of movie directors, and I see project management sort of as an art because, if you're looking at the orchestra, the maestro, he is like is managing all these components, all these elements. They need to go well together. And it's the same thing if you look at a movie director, and you have different actors, and you're working on different sets, and you have action pieces. You need to write the dialogues. So it's putting all this together for me is an art. And working as a project manager, usually when you're putting a project together, no matter how big, there you have different components, and people have different moods. You're dealing with different people, sometimes people with different backgrounds. Sometimes people wake up not in a good mood. So you need to also recognize that and but just be able to put all these pieces together and make a final product. For me, that's art.
You're like a conductor
Yes, yes, yes.
and telling the strings when they come in and the percussion to back off a little bit and,
Yeah,
bring in the brass. And
yeah, yeah.
it's really cool. I put interviews as my art.
Wow. But a lot of people say a lot of things about you and your skills for interviews. And that's art as well, being like what you're doing right now, being able to make me speak. I'm a little bit of a shy person. So, and being able
Oh,
to
I haven't
make
seen
people
any
to open up.
evidence of that.
Yeah, but I am. I'm sort of an introvert, and I really believe that being able to make people speak, that's also an art because, I can be, and right now it's kind of late to me, and I could be like when my mood would be a little bit down, but just being able to make these questions and bring out the best of me during an interview for me is an art as well.
And I started this project to find out what people think and know about us returning to the moon in 2024. And I was wondering, do you remember how you learned that NASA was planning to send the astronauts back to the moon in 2024?
Yeah, actually, so I got the confirmation around the same time that everybody did, early 2020. And for me, this was just like, wow, things are actually going to move forward now because we sort of had this time where, NASA doesn't really want to commit into going back to the moon. And you have people really pushing for, no, let's forget about the moon. We've been there. Let's go to Mars. And then when I read the news that NASA actually put the money on the table for these different companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX, and to actually start already building the technology for us to go back to the moon. For me, this was an amazing news.
And, what do you hope that they get out of going back to the moon? What would make it worthwhile for you?
For me, I'm always thinking about business. So I think if they can find ways to monetize going to the moon, because let's be honest, we don't think that NASA is going to be financing these trips forever, unless let's say there's some sort of a threat and some defense motivations, right? If you put that on the side, then we actually need to be able to find some sort of a business model, something that can work in making money out of these trips to the moon. And this is what I want to see. I want to see the space economy grow, and especially focusing into this space travel sector, focusing on the moon. And this is what I want. I want actually for them to come back and for us to be able to consolidate that.
Not everybody thinks that going back to the moon is a good investment. Or if it is a good investment, maybe the timing's wrong. Like maybe there's more urgent things like climate change and world poverty and getting everybody connected and online, social justice, the pandemic, maybe. Uh, I think a lot of people imagine that us going back to the moon will be a moment that will all come together like we did back in 1969. But I think a lot of people won't know about it. But the pandemic is something that brought us all together. It's kind of ironic. But what do you say to those people? I mean, that say, why are we spending tens of billions of dollars to put a few people on the moon when we have people that aren't connected to the internet and who don't have access to computers?
Yeah. So coming from a developing country, I get this question the whole time in my country. People asking, why are we investing in space technology? We don't have roads. We need better schools, better hospitals. We need we need infrastructures. We have people that need food? So why are we investing in space technology? And my answer is always simple. Let's look at the problems that we can solve using space technology. We need telecommunications, and satellite is the fastest way for us to really to be able to provide telecommunication in different regions of the country. Otherwise, since we don't have the ground infrastructure, we would have to make huge investments, and it would take a long time for us to be able to deploy the ground infrastructures all over the country. But if you send a satellite app that sending the signal down, we can actually take telecommunications in all these different places. In a more global way, if you look at the benefits that we have been able to get through space exploration, now we now have GPS, and it's sort of like impossible to navigate without GPS. I can't use those physical maps anymore. And this goes back to your question about, we are becoming a little bit down, because of technology. But we really look at all these benefits that we get from space exploration. Earth observation satellites, we can monitor actually the climate and then all this sort of environmental conditions in our planet. But not only that, there's so many technologies that have originated from space exploration, even the X-ray machine, technology on the shoes that we wear, milk powder mill also originated from space exploration, doing research on what the astronauts can use in the International Space Station. So imagine if we go to the moon, what sort of technology are we going to be able to develop to sustain the colony that we are going to deploy at the moon? And then we can spin that up back to Earth to solve a lot of problems. And just to close, recently I read the news that the American government, through the Defense Department, they are planning to deploy our solar a satellite system that is going to collect solar power and beam that down back to Earth. Just imagine that the benefit of that. We're going to have clean energy coming from satellites, and this is really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the amount of energy that is produced by the sun and how much of it actually falls on the Earth, like the difference, like only 1/700th billionth of the sun's energy falls on the Earth. So we actually have access to essentially unlimited power. Like, we could put data centers in the sky and power them for free, essentially. No additional cost.
Yeah, that's true.
Doing crypto mining so that we can buy Teslas.
Yeah, because that's one of the issues that people complain about crypto mining is that, it's not good for the environment. And as you say, imagine if you can have these data centers in space, it would be amazing.
So do you have any interest in going to space yourself if it was safe and affordable?
Yes, I would. I would in a heartbeat. If you tell me there's a ticket for you tomorrow, I wouldn't think twice. I would go.
So like how far would you go? Just to orbit or to the moon? Or would you consider immigrating to Mars? Like how far would you go?
I would go to the moon. I don't think I would go to Mars because I have a family and I wouldn't want to leave my family or be away from my family for too long. So I would go as far to the moon. That would be my limit.
And you don't think you convinced them to go with you?
I don't know. I don't want to make my family sit in a spaceship for about minimum 6 months to Mars. I don't think they would agree either.
Now, have your views on this matter changed since the COVID lockdown? Like maybe before last March, like, oh yeah, 6 months together with the family in a small spacecraft be okay. And then after the COVID lockdown, you're like, oh, I really got to get out. I mean, like, have your views changed at all, or you think you would have said the same thing a year ago?
Yeah, it did change because one of the fundamental things about astronauts is that they really have a very strong mind and strong will, and they are prepared to be in confined places. They're trained for that. But a regular family is not, and we are all living in this pandemic. And sometimes I really need to go for a walk. Just sometimes even take the kids for a walk because it's important. It's a little bit frustrating. I think there are already studies on the impact that this can have psychologically, and even kids growing up. But I don't think it would be a very good experience for kids at the moment, unless they are well prepared.
I think most of the people I've talked to said they would go to space, but of the ones that said they wouldn't, claustrophobia is definitely a common concern.
That's
So
for me.
When we have these colonies on the moon and on Mars, people are going to be indoors all the time. I mean, are these like different types of people, or you think there's some way we can adapt and cope to that?
I think it's going to be really hard to adapt. So the thing is that the people that are going to I mean, to the moon is easier because there's a possibility to come back, right? But those that are going to Mars, so they know that probably they will not be coming back. So it's a one-way trip. And even if we train people, we will never be 100% certain until we have people actually living in these colonies. You know, because if I'm motivated to, I want to go to Mars and I'm having this training and I know, no, don't worry, it's going to be fine. I will not care about Earth. I will not think about coming back. But I'm 100% sure that people would have, you know, we always have ups and downs and we all have bad days. And I'm sure that there'll be days that the people that go to Mars, they'll be thinking, I wish I was on Earth. You know, I'm tired of having to stay indoors, you know, this radiation, not being able to be outside without my spacesuit. This is really starting to affect me psychologically. I think we will have these problems.
You still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I was. It seems like the connection broke out there right as you were talking about kind of the adapting to Mars piece.
Yeah, I was just saying because you know, I think there's going to be some psychological problems no matter how trained you are. Because imagine you can't really go outside without your spacesuit because of radiation and you need oxygen. And this is going to be for more than 100 years when people go to Mars. Nobody's going to be able to walk outside without the spacesuit and for radiation protection and also for oxygen, right? And definitely there are going to be days that someone is going to be like, I'm tired.
That's true. Well, Eldridge, I really appreciate your time. I know we covered a lot of ground, but is there something that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to?
Yeah, I think we could just talk a little bit about the commercialization of space. So what we're currently living, you know, this paradigm shift because we have lived for so long in a space era that all sorts of investments were made from governments, and now every day a new startup is formed. You know, every single day there's this startup for satellite images, for CubeSats, for everything. You know, and it's just like the industry is really flourishing. So I'm wondering what type of industry we're going to have like 3, 4, 5 years from now, and I don't know what's your opinion on that.
Yeah, I often think that the 2020s are going to be the space exploration what the 1990s were to the internet. And the SpaceX Starship is like the Netscape browser.
Yeah.
Of course, today we had a compile issue or a crash, so that's kind of unfortunate. I don't know if you saw the SN11 test flight.
Yeah, I did.
That's it's got to be disheartening, especially with all the
Yeah,
fog. You really couldn't see what was going on.
yeah.
But I think in 2030, well, I don't know. I'm starting. I really thought Starship would have turned out a lot better by now. So it's kind of bummed me out a little. But I mean, um, the thing is, SpaceX is the only one that's really made any demonstrative progress on reusable rockets that I've seen. And people are talking about following along, but not everybody. And I don't think. Uh, I mean, and without getting the economics right, our ability to get into space is going to be very hampered. And I think reusability is key to those economics.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I agree with you 100%.
so all my chips are on Starship,
Yeah.
and today's a day that tries your faith.
Yeah, you're totally right because aside from like SpaceX is the only company that is committed to Mars. And not only that, and as you say, they are the only company that have been proven to show the reusability of their rockets, right? And Starship is the next big step, not only for SpaceX, but for space exploration, because there's no other company that is as ambitious as SpaceX and has also progressed that far. So we are all very hopeful for SpaceX success.
But to your question, I think this decade is going to be transformative. I think this is what the people who saw Neil and Buzz land on the moon in 1969 thought the 1970s would be like. And, they've been very disappointed for the past, 50 years. So finally they might get to see what the 1970s should have been.
Yeah, yeah, totally right. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much, Eldridge. And I look forward to seeing you around the Space Hero universe and staying in contact. And thank you again so much for signing up for my project.
Thank you so much, Nathan. And anytime, feel free to invite me. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was really fun. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.